Welcome to Zoe Stories. My girlfriend caught me in her dress. Chris had always been the kind of person people described as nice, unassuming, polite, and quiet. In group settings, he tended to stay on the sidelines, content to listen rather than speak. While others shared their stories and laughter, Chris often stayed in his head, lost in thoughts that he didn't dare express out loud. He liked his solitude, his moments of peace, and his routine. Living with Emily, his girlfriend of 2 years, had added comfort to his life. She was warm, outgoing, and loved to talk about her day, her friends, and her work. They balanced each other in a way that worked. She brought the spark, while he provided the calm. To Emily, Chris was reliable and steady, the kind of partner she could depend on, but she always sensed there was more beneath his quiet demeanor. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Chris had a secret. For as long as he could remember, he had been fascinated by women's clothes. The way a silk blouse draped over someone's shoulders, the delicate curve of high heels, the whisper of lace against skin, it called to him in a way that he couldn't quite explain. But society had its rules, and Chris had spent his whole life trying to follow them. This part of himself, this deep yearning, had always stayed hidden, locked away in the quiet recesses of his mind. He had convinced himself it was just a phase, a passing curiosity. Yet, as the years went by, the feelings grew stronger. He couldn't ignore them anymore. Every now and then, when Emily was out, he'd open her closet, running his fingers over her dresses, imagining how they would feel against his skin. But he never dared go further. The fear of being discovered, of being judged, loomed too large. Until that one afternoon. It had been a particularly stressful week at work, and Chris was eager to unwind. Emily had texted him earlier, letting him know she would be out late with friends, which meant he had the apartment to himself. Sitting alone on the couch, the quiet enveloped him, but instead of finding peace, Chris felt the pull. It was that gnawing urge he had been fighting for years, the desire to explore the part of him that he kept hidden. He stood up, almost without thinking, and wandered into their bedroom. The closet door creaked as he opened it, revealing Emily's neatly hung dresses, skirts, and blouses. His heart raced as his fingers grazed over the fabrics. He hesitated for a moment, glancing at the clock, calculating how much time he had. Then, almost on instinct, Chris reached for a pastel pink dress, a soft, flowing one that Emily had worn on their last date night. He slipped it off the hanger, the fabric smooth in his hands, and carefully put it on. The dress slid over him like a second skin, and as he zipped it up, Chris felt a wave of relief, as though he had finally let out a breath he'd been holding for years. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. The person looking back at him felt familiar yet new. The dress fit him surprisingly well, draping elegantly over his slender frame. He twirled slightly, watching the hem sway with his movements. For the first time in his life, Chris felt beautiful, and for a fleeting moment, that beauty washed away the years of shame and fear. He picked out a pair of Emily's earrings from her jewelry box and carefully fastened them. Just as he was adjusting them, he heard it. A noise at the front door. Panic gripped his chest as he realized what was happening. Emily was home early. Chris barely had time to react before she stepped into the room. "Chris." Emily's voice was soft but puzzled, her eyes wide as she took in the sight of him dressed in her clothes. He froze, a wave of dread washing over him. His hands trembled as he tried to speak, but no words came out. All he could think about was how she must be feeling. Shocked, confused, maybe even angry. He braced himself for her reaction, waiting for the moment she would scream or demand an explanation. But instead, Emily did something Chris never expected. She smiled. "Chris, what are you doing?" Her voice wasn't accusatory, just curious. Gentle, even. His face burned with embarrassment, his heart pounding. I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't mean to. I don't know how to explain it." His words tumbled out in a rush. I've been feeling this way for a long time, but I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you'd hate me." Emily didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, looking at him, really looking at him. Then, to his surprise, she stepped closer, reaching out to touch the fabric of the dress. "Why would I hate you? If this makes you happy, then I want to understand." Chris blinked, his shock evident. You're not upset." She shook her head slowly, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Chris, I love you for who you are, not for how you dress. If this is something you've wanted to explore, we can explore it together." From that moment on, their relationship transformed. Chris no longer had to hide this part of himself, and Emily was eager to be a part of it. They spent hours together, experimenting with different outfits, makeup, and even hairstyles. Emily helped Chris discover a side of himself he had buried for so long, and in turn, their bond grew deeper. She was fascinated by how confident he became when he dressed in feminine clothes, and Chris found himself opening up to her in ways he had never imagined. Their first outing together was a nerve-wracking but exhilarating experience. Dressed in a sleek black dress, Chris clutched Emily's hand as they walked into a small cafe. He could feel the eyes of strangers on him, but Emily's presence grounded him, reminding him that he wasn't alone. To his surprise, no one seemed to care. The world didn't stop turning because he was dressed as a woman. Instead, Chris felt a surge of confidence and liberation that he hadn't expected. For the first time in his life, he felt truly free. As time went on, Chris and Emily's relationship evolved into something more profound and authentic. Their love had always been strong, but now it was built on an even deeper foundation of trust and openness. Emily had not only accepted Chris' hidden side, but had embraced it with open arms, encouraging him to explore who he truly was without fear or shame. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Chris in a floral sundress and Emily wrapped in her favorite sweater, they reflected on how far they had come. "I never thought I'd feel this comfortable," Chris admitted, his voice soft. "I was so scared for so long." Emily smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "You don't have to hide anymore, Chris. Not from me, not from anyone." He looked down at her, his heart swelling with gratitude and love. "Thank you, Emily, for everything." She leaned up and kissed him gently on the cheek. "You don't need to thank me. I love you for exactly who you are. And I always will." In that moment, Chris realized how lucky he was, not just for having found someone who accepted him, but for finding the courage to accept himself. Together, they had crossed a threshold, stepping into a new chapter where love, acceptance, and self-discovery would lead them forward into a future filled with possibility. Thank you for joining us on another captivating journey through Zoe's stories. Remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale. Until next time, keep exploring, keep imagining, and keep believing in the magic of storytelling. See you in the next chapter.